Zakir Khan was more than just a rising tech entrepreneur behind his polished image. He masterminded one of London's most ruthless phone theft empires. Meanwhile, undercover officers like Detective Sarah Mitchell and Agent James Harper risked everything to infiltrate a criminal network that moved millions in stolen devices, operating in the shadows with terrifying precision. This is the story of how a city's streets became the battleground in a high-stakes game of deception, danger, and justice. In early 2022, London saw a sudden surge in mobile phone thefts. What used to be occasional street snatches turned into a daily pattern of crime, spreading across the city. Tourists were targeted while taking photos outside landmarks. Commuters had their phones grabbed from their hands while waiting for trains. Even people sitting in cafes weren't safe. Thieves would walk by, swipe a phone off a table and disappear into the crowd. Reports flooded in from nearly every borough. The numbers were staggering. Over 1,000 phones stolen in a single week, many in broad daylight. At first, police treated the rise in cases as the work of multiple opportunists. Street-level crime in London was nothing new, and phone theft had always been an issue in high-traffic areas. But something felt different. The thieves were faster, more coordinated, and almost impossible to catch. CCTV footage captured masked riders on electric bikes weaving through traffic, grabbing phones without stopping, and vanishing down side streets before anyone could react. Some thieves worked in pairs, others rode alone, but what united them was their efficiency. The entire theft, spotting the target, striking, and vanishing, often took under 10 seconds. Despite the rising reports, police found little evidence. Few fingerprints were recovered. Witness descriptions were vague, and even when a suspect was caught, the stolen phone was already gone, either sold or wiped clean. Victims tried to track their devices using apps, but within minutes the phones would go dark. Location disabled, SIM removed, data wiped. By the summer, it was clear these weren't isolated crimes. There was a system behind them. Phones were being stolen in central London and disappearing completely from the network by nightfall. Recovery rates were near zero. Investigators started looking deeper and noticed something chilling. The thefts weren't random. They were mapped, scheduled, and executed with clear planning. Hotspots moved based on the time of day. High-value phones were prioritized. Thieves seemed to know exactly when and where to strike for the highest payoff and the lowest risk. This wasn't a wave of petty criminals. It was the beginning of something organized, something invisible. Behind the chaos, someone was pulling strings. The police didn't know it yet, but London wasn't just facing a crime spree. It was facing a network, a system designed to steal, vanish, and profit with precision. As phone thefts continued to rise across London, police analysts began digging into the data. At first glance, the incidents appeared random, different victims, different locations, different times. But when investigators started mapping the thefts, patterns began to emerge. Certain boroughs lit up repeatedly, with thefts happening at the same time each day. Lunchtime hotspots near financial districts. Late-night snatches around transport hubs. It wasn't random, it was routine. Even more disturbing was what happened after the phones were stolen. Normally, a stolen device could be tracked for hours or even days before the battery died. But these phones were vanishing from networks within minutes. GPS tracking was disabled almost immediately. Victims couldn't even activate remote data wipes before their phones had been reset or shut down. And once that happened, the devices went silent. Forever. Police tried following the usual routes, looking at local pawn shops, scanning online resale sites, reaching out to known black market tech dealers. Nothing. Not a single stolen phone turned up for resale locally. It was as if the devices had been swallowed by the city. Then, weeks or even months later, some of these phones began reappearing, not in London, but in listings traced to markets in Romania, Dubai, and Nigeria. The prices were high, and the devices were cleaned, reboxed, and often came with new warranty stickers. Each one looked brand new. Behind the scenes, law enforcement realized they were dealing with a level of professionalism they hadn't encountered before. This wasn't someone snatching a phone and selling it for cash on the corner. This was organized, deliberate, and global. Every step, from the theft on the street to the resale overseas, was carefully planned and nearly impossible to trace. One officer described it as watching smoke slip through their fingers. Every lead ended in a dead end. Every suspect seemed to be a low-level runner with no real knowledge of who was in charge. No names, no hierarchy. Just a stream of stolen phones vanishing into thin air. The deeper they looked, the more it became clear. There was an invisible infrastructure in place. One that moved fast, operated quietly, and left no fingerprints. It mimicked the operations of a logistics company more than a street gang. This wasn't just a criminal crew, it was a business, and it was just getting started. The first real break in the investigation came from an unexpected complaint. A man in East London reported that he had taken his phone to a local repair shop, but it was never returned. When he pressed for answers, the shop suddenly closed, and the staff disappeared. At first it seemed like a small scam, a dodgy technician running off with customer devices, but when officers visited the location, what they found didn't match the story of a simple repair business. The shop's interior was oddly sterile. No customer phones waiting for repair. No paperwork. No trace of the people who had supposedly worked there just days earlier. What stood out most was the back room. Behind a false wall was a storage area filled with phone parts, screens, batteries, internal components, all separated and labeled. None of the parts could be traced to a specific device. It looked more like a disassembly line than a repair shop. Over the next few weeks, investigators identified more shops with similar setups. Some claimed to repair phones, others presented themselves as second-hand retailers. But all had common traits. Little to no public foot traffic, no advertising, minimal staff, and often, highly secure backrooms. Many were strategically placed near high-crime areas, while others were scattered in industrial estates far from public view. Police began suspecting that these shops weren't real businesses at all. They were processing centers, places where stolen phones were quickly broken down into parts, reset or prepared for shipment. By separating the components, the devices became almost untraceable. A phone reported stolen in London might end up with its screen sold in one country, its motherboard in another, and its casing melted for scrap. Warrants were issued, and raids began. One location in South London had a locked basement where devices were being wiped and fitted with international SIM cards. In another, police found shelves of phones already boxed for export. The sheer volume was staggering. Hundreds of devices in a single day. But despite the evidence, there was still no sign of who was running the operation. Every shop was registered under fake names. Lease agreements were signed with forged documents. Surveillance footage showed delivery drivers dropping off packages, but never the same person twice. The entire system had been designed to be faceless, fast, and flexible. Someone had built a machine, and it was still running at full speed. With mounting evidence pointing to a larger network, the Metropolitan Police knew they couldn't rely on traditional investigations alone. Arresting low-level runners and raiding fake phone shops wasn't enough. Every time they shut down one location, another would open somewhere else. Whoever was behind the operation was always one step ahead, vanishing before police could even identify them. It was clear the system was built to survive disruption. That's when authorities made a bold decision to go undercover. Operation Pulse was launched in total secrecy. This new task force was small, highly trained, and tasked with one objective: get inside the network and map it from within. Officers posed as everything from electronics dealers to shady couriers. Others took jobs as warehouse workers, delivery drivers, or even staff in the very shops under surveillance. Their goal wasn't just to gather evidence. It was to understand how the system worked, who controlled it, and where the money was going. Using burner phones, encrypted messaging apps, and false identities, undercover agents began making contact with individuals suspected of being connected to the stolen phone trade. Some of these initial interactions were risky. One officer pretending to be a reseller met with a man who offered to buy 30 clean iPhones in cash. No questions asked. Another posed as a technician and was offered a job at a repair shop where devices came in through the back door and were gone within hours. Police used hidden cameras, microphones, and GPS trackers to build a picture of the operation. They tracked the movement of packages from one location to the next. They recorded conversations in back rooms, and they started seeing the same names appear again and again. Elise's connected to dozens of different businesses, fake companies and offshore bank accounts. But even with all this, there was still no clear leader. Every person they encountered seemed to know only one piece of the puzzle. The system was layered, compartmentalized, and designed to protect the person at the top. Orders came in anonymously. Payments were made in cryptocurrency, and the stolen phones. They were being moved faster than anyone had expected, sometimes out of the country within 24 hours of being taken. Operation Pulse was working, but they were deep in enemy territory now. One wrong move, one slip-up, and the entire investigation could be exposed. What they were chasing was bigger than they'd imagined, a ghost network with no face and no trace. But they were getting closer. A few months into Operation Pulse, a valuable tip came from a seemingly minor lead, a warehouse in an industrial estate near Enfield, on the outskirts of London. It was listed under a generic logistics company name and appeared dormant, with no clear signage and minimal visible activity. But drone surveillance told a different story. Late at night, unmarked vans would arrive and leave within minutes. Sometimes with boxes, sometimes empty-handed. No deliveries were recorded on the books. No CCTV cameras faced the entrance. The place was a black hole. Officers watched for weeks. Patterns began to emerge. The deliveries always took place between 2 and 4 a.m. The drivers wore no uniforms, used burner phones, and rarely returned more than once. The boxes they carried were small and lightweight, often wrapped in black plastic. It was clear this location wasn't storing bulk items. It was processing high-value compact cargo. The kind of items that could be moved quickly and sold even faster. One night, undercover officers intercepted a driver just minutes before a scheduled drop. They posed as street criminals and offered cash for the goods, pretending to be part of a rival crew. The driver, nervous but cooperative, handed over a sealed box and drove off without asking questions. Inside the box were 84 mobile phones, all wiped, reboxed, and ready for resale. Most were high-end models, iPhones and Samsung Galaxy devices, with a total street value of over. With that, police had confirmation. The warehouse wasn't just involved, it was central. A raid was planned within days, timed for just after a major shipment was expected to arrive. When officers stormed the building, they found the front office nearly empty. It was a shell operation. But in the basement, hidden behind a false wall, they discovered what looked like a tech lab. Dozens of phones sat on charging racks. Tables were lined with SIM card trays, tools and laptops running software to wipe and reprogram devices. Phones were being fitted with international SIMs, making them harder to track and easier to activate abroad. Documents recovered from the raid revealed overseas shipping addresses, crypto wallet details, and multiple fake company names, used to send packages across Europe and the Middle East. But even with this breakthrough, one thing remained missing: leadership. There was still no face behind the network. The operation was vast, but no single person had yet been tied to the entire web. Whoever was behind it had built a perfect layer of distance, and they were still out there. After the Enfield warehouse raid, detectives began piecing together the fragments of the international puzzle. Shipments were leaving the UK disguised as legitimate exports. At first, he denied everything, but after hours of questioning and a promise of immunity, he began to talk. What he revealed cracked the case wide open. He described a shipping company in North London used as a central hub. The company presented itself as a fast-growing logistics provider. moving goods for small businesses and online retailers. But behind closed doors, it offered a secret menu, off-the-books shipments, with no tracking, no questions asked, and extra cash paid in hand. It was through this system that thousands of phones had passed, disguised among legal exports and sent to buyers across Europe, the Middle East, and West Africa. Police launched a covert operation to monitor the company. They installed cameras, tapped burner phones, and tracked outgoing shipments. Patterns emerged: specific days for high-value exports, certain vans always used for sensitive packages. The company had dozens of employees, but only a few were in the inner circle. They coordinated deliveries late at night, ensured paperwork looked legitimate, and used encrypted apps to communicate. Still, none of them appeared to be in charge. Everyone answered to someone higher, someone they never met in person. Payments came from anonymous accounts. Instructions arrived through messaging apps with disappearing messages. Whoever was at the top had built an empire based on silence, speed, and digital shadows. And then a name surfaced, one that no one in law enforcement had expected. It wasn't a gang leader. It wasn't a known criminal. It was a tech entrepreneur. The name that surfaced during the surveillance stunned investigators. Zakir Khan. On paper, he was the model of a successful entrepreneur. At just 38, Khan had built a respected tech startup, focused on e-commerce and refurbished electronics. He had appeared in interviews, spoken at youth business events, and even partnered with local councils on digital inclusion programs. His company had real offices, real staff, and real funding. To the outside world, he was a rising star in London's tech scene. But behind the polished image was something far more dangerous. Forensic analysis of financial records connected to the shipping company revealed that large sums of money, sometimes over £100,000 a week, were being funneled through a network of offshore accounts. Those accounts in turn were traced back to shell corporations linked to Khan's legitimate business. At first, the links were indirect, payments disguised as consulting fees. Shipments routed through companies with shared addresses. But as police dug deeper, the connections grew stronger. Phone metadata placed Khan within a few hundred meters of several key sites, including the Enfield warehouse and the fake repair shops, just days before major movements of stolen goods. He had never entered the buildings himself, but his digital fingerprints were all over the operation. His emails, recovered through a court order, showed communication with aliases already linked to the phone theft network. None of the messages contained direct references to illegal activity, but the timing of these exchanges lined up perfectly with major shipments and financial transfers. Even more telling was Khan's personal wealth. Despite declaring modest earnings, he owned multiple properties under different names, drove high-end vehicles, and had invested in overseas ventures that had no clear sources of income. Cryptocurrency accounts registered to his former business partners showed withdrawals matching the value of missing phone shipments almost to the pound. To the undercover officers, it became clear. Khan wasn't just involved, he was running the show. He had used his legitimate businesses as a front, blending clean operations with a highly sophisticated criminal network. Every layer had been designed to insulate him from prosecution. He never handled the stolen goods. He didn't speak to the couriers, but everything flowed through him. Money, devices, instructions. Zakir Khan had built a criminal empire in plain sight, and now that police had identified him, the question wasn't just how to arrest him, but how to bring down everything he had built without tipping him off. After identifying Zakir Khan as the mastermind, the police knew the next steps would require patience and precision. Arresting him too soon could cause the entire network to dissolve and vanish without a trace. Instead, they chose to play the long game, embedding undercover officers deeper into Khan's operation to gather undeniable evidence. The goal was clear: get inside the inner circle and uncover every detail of how this massive criminal enterprise functioned. Over the following 6 months, officers took on increasingly risky roles. One undercover agent posed as a rival gang member seeking to negotiate a merger, hoping to gain Khan's trust and access restricted meetings. Another infiltrated one of Khan's logistics firms, gaining employment as a warehouse worker, handling shipments linked to the stolen phones. These officers observed the daily flow of goods and finances, witnessing the precise methods used to clean and prepare stolen devices for export. Behind the scenes, Khan was negotiating expansion plans with contacts in Spain and Turkey. He aimed to broaden the operation beyond phones, targeting consumer electronics such as tablets, laptops, and smartwatches. The scale was growing, and so was the risk. Despite efforts to compartmentalize information within the gang, undercover officers noticed cracks forming in the secrecy. Frustrations with the system and mistrust among mid-level operatives created opportunities for police to gather intel. Surveillance teams installed hidden cameras in key locations, capturing exchanges of cash and encrypted phones. They intercepted messages sent through disappearing apps, decoding them with the help of cyber units. Financial investigators traced complex money laundering schemes, following the flow of funds from cryptocurrency wallets back to Khan's legitimate businesses and offshore accounts. The investigation revealed a chilling truth. Khan had engineered a system that could operate independently of his direct involvement. Orders came through encrypted channels, payments were split into microtransactions, and the network relied on a web of fake companies and anonymous couriers. This level of sophistication made it nearly impossible to dismantle with a single strike. Still, the police pushed forward, every meeting recorded, every shipment tracked, and every transaction logged, brought them closer to building a case strong enough to ensure Khan and his associates would face justice. But time was running out. Khan's plans to scale the operation meant the stakes were rising, and one misstep could allow the criminal empire to slip through their fingers once more. With months of undercover work and surveillance behind them, the police finally felt ready to act. The operation had grown into a complex web of evidence linking Zakir Khan and his network to an estimated 50 million tons in stolen phone sales. The moment had come to dismantle the entire system at once, shutting down warehouses, seizing shipments, freezing bank accounts, and arresting key players in one coordinated strike. The night before the raid, officers held a final briefing. Every detail was planned to the second. Teams were assigned to storm locations across London and several sites overseas through international cooperation. The goal was to prevent any leaks or warnings that could give Khan or his associates a chance to disappear. In the early hours, raids began simultaneously. At the Enfield warehouse, officers found hundreds of phones in various stages of wiping and repackaging. The fake repair shops were shuttered, their employees detained for questioning. Financial institutions cooperated to freeze millions held in accounts linked to Khan's network. Meanwhile, undercover officers arrested mid-level couriers and logistics managers, cutting off vital links in the supply chain. Despite the chaos, Khan himself remained elusive. Months of surveillance revealed he rarely set foot in the locations being raided. His communication devices were encrypted and frequently swapped. But investigators had one final plan, tracking his financial footprint and digital activity through a sophisticated sting. Using a combination of cyber tools and old-fashioned detective work, officers traced a series of cryptocurrency transfers back to a luxury penthouse in central London. Surveillance teams watched as Khan arrived with two associates. After confirming his presence, the arrest team moved in. Khan was taken into custody without incident, ending years of shadowy control. In the days that followed, police uncovered even more layers of the operation. Evidence showed that Khan had been grooming a successor, planning to expand the empire further if caught. Files on seized computers revealed contacts in multiple countries and detailed records of shipments worth millions more than originally estimated. The scale and professionalism of the operation shocked even seasoned officers. What had started as a surge in street thefts had turned out to be a sprawling criminal enterprise, hidden beneath the surface of London's legitimate business world. The arrest sent a clear message: no matter how sophisticated or well hidden, crime that exploits communities and robs people of their property would not go unpunished. The aftermath of the raid sent ripples throughout London and beyond. For months, stolen phones had flooded the city's streets. But now, thanks to the undercover operation, the flow began to dry up. With warehouses shut down and key players behind bars, the criminal network that had operated in the shadows was dismantled. Victims who had lost their devices finally saw hope for recovery, and the police received widespread praise for bringing down one of the most sophisticated theft rings in recent memory. The trial of Zakir Khan became a major event. Prosecutors presented mountains of evidence gathered through undercover work, financial tracing and digital surveillance. Emails, shipment logs and cryptocurrency transfers painted a clear picture of a man who had orchestrated a vast criminal empire disguised as a legitimate business. Khan's defense argued he was unaware of the stolen goods passing through his companies, but the overwhelming evidence made it difficult to believe. In court, former undercover officers gave detailed testimony about their infiltration into the network, the high-tech methods used to process stolen phones, and the careful planning behind every shipment. The judge described the operation as a criminal business run with ruthless efficiency and deliberate deception. After weeks of proceedings, Khan was convicted on multiple charges including conspiracy to commit theft, money laundering, operating a criminal enterprise. He received a lengthy prison sentence, sending a strong message that no one was above the law. Beyond the courtroom, police departments across the UK began reviewing their strategies for handling high-tech organized crime. Operation Pulse became a model for future investigations, demonstrating the power of undercover work combined with digital forensics and international cooperation. The case highlighted the importance of staying ahead of criminals who exploit technology to hide their activities. For Londoners, the crackdown restored a sense of safety on the streets and reminded everyone that crime often has hidden depths. What looked like random phone snatches were part of a carefully orchestrated system, one that had cost millions and damaged countless lives. But with determination, innovation, and teamwork, the police had exposed the network and taken it down. Though the gang was destroyed, the story also served as a warning. Criminals constantly adapt, and the fight against organized crime is ongoing. But for now, London had reclaimed its streets, and justice had been served. The undercover officers who risked everything had changed the game,